Back to Canberra now, and our panel, joining me, member for Hawke, Labor MP Sam Ray, and Liberal MP, member for Casey, Aaron Violi. Great to see you both here in the studio, and welcome, Sam, to this regular Monday panel now.
Thank you for having me, Kieran.
Let's talk about this approach to targeting Peter Dutton. Can we expect more of this, do you think, in the lead up to the election? Is it going to be a negative campaign?
Oh, I think Peter Dutton really exemplifies his own values when he goes out into public, Kieran. At the end of the day, the Dutton opposition has been defined by an oppositional approach to every single thing the government has tried to do constructive. We've seen Peter Dutton oppose every single cost of living measure that this government has tried to put up. I don't think it takes a lot of clever politics for the public to understand what Peter Dutton's all about. And the reality is he's arrogant and he is a risk to our community. We don't want to see the cuts that we know the Liberals are going to bring when we're already in a cost of living crisis.
Sam, they're calling Peter Dutton arrogant. This morning, the Treasurer said Mr Dutton is guilty of reckless arrogance.
Must be in the talking points.
Well, it might be in the focus groups.
Well, I think
this might be what people are feeding back to them.
Let's take a step back. With this line that the government runs, that we oppose everything, ignores the fact that we had bipartisan support on the Integrity Commission, bipartisan support on NDIS, which is one of the top 5 spending budget items, bipartisan support on aged care, which again is another one of those top 5 items in the budget on spending. So we'll work constructively with the government when they put forward good policies, but we're not going to give them a free pass. And take another step back, and the reality is if this government are criticising the coalition, it's because they're not prepared to stand on their own record over the last 2.5 years. This Prime Minister has been in Parliament for 28 years. He spent 20 years in opposition. He is institutionalised to opposition. He has been focused on 2 things this term: The Voice and criticising the coalition. If he'd been focused on solving the challenges that the Australian people face, he wouldn't need to run negative campaigns. He could campaign on his policies and what he's delivered. He hasn't delivered for the Australian people. Not one Australian is better today than they were 2.5 years ago, and that's why we're seeing this negative politics.
It's a tough one to combat. In the United States, we saw it as well. Given the high inflationary environment, it's a tough time for incumbents, isn't it?
We've seen a lot of inflation pressure internationally, Kieran. You're absolutely right. But let's be serious. The Liberal government under Scott Morrison and his predecessors left Australia with a 6.1% inflation number. That's down now to 2.8%. Now, the impact of that has been huge on families, on households. We've seen the cost of everything going up. And so our government...
And they generally blame governments, don't they?
Well, look, but people rightly are feeling that pressure. It is very impactful on people at the household level. And the reality is that the decisions that the former Liberal government made led Australia to that position. We've worked tirelessly and we are relentlessly focused on dealing with those cost of living issues to support people at the household budgetary level. We'll keep doing it. We'll do it without any hesitation whatsoever. And as I said, every single cost of living measure that we have brought to the Parliament, the Liberals have tried to block.
This could be the final 2 sitting weeks before the next election. So obviously it is going to be fought on this issue of cost of living. Does the coalition, do you feel the coalition needs to flesh out its own plans in the meantime to avoid a vacuum where a scare campaign can take hold?
And we always need to do both, Kieran. As I've said it quite a lot, we need to hold the government to account and put forward a positive policy. It's interesting. Apparently, the former government is responsible for COVID. We all know that closing borders had to put supply chain pressures on inflation, on the economy. The reality is 2.5 years in, higher government spending has meant that inflation has been higher for longer. We're seeing rate cuts in the US, in New Zealand, while they're growing at a higher rate than Australia. It is increased government spending, as the RBA governor has said, that is causing this inflation to be sticky. They can talk about the 2.8%. We all know that is artificial through the energy rebate, which is the only reason the Treasurer brought it in. They don't have any tangible solutions for the Australian people. We have said as a coalition, we'll continue to bring forward policies. We brought forward a policy around $5 billion to unlock housing.
Because this is, the Prime Minister calls it the final quarter. You've got to kick with the wind in the final quarter. This is when the coalition faces the greatest scrutiny, isn't it? The opposition in the final stretch, the opposition leader who's become competitive, faces an intensity of scrutiny like he wouldn't have seen before.
And that's part of being in opposition. That's why we put forward that housing policy. We've said very clearly we've put forward a policy around nuclear and we'll release the costings on those. We're still waiting for the costings on the capacity investment scheme, which the government are rolling out as we speak. We don't know how much that's going to cost the Australian people. So there's a lot more questions the Albanese government have to answer as well. But we'll release our policies as the election gets closer.
This is, as we said, the final quarter, an election due either March or May, that sort of territory. But either way, after Australia Day, we're game on. This is nearing the end. Do you feel like the government needs to step up with some more big ticket items to grab people's attention?
Kieran, I speak to the Prime Minister regularly, and I know that there's a lot of discussion in the media and in the community about when the election date's going to be. The Prime Minister of Australia is relentlessly focused on dealing with the cost of living for families and households. That's where his focus is every single day. And I just want to pick up on a point that was made just there by my colleague. No one trusts the Liberal Party when it comes to economic management anymore. That used to be their brand. That brand is long gone. They left Australia with $1 trillion of Liberal debt, and they didn't return a single budget surplus in the entire period of government. Nearly a decade of budget deficits from the Liberal Party. We've had 2 consecutive budget surpluses by the Labor government. At the end of the day, I think Australians know who they can rely on for sustainable economic management, and we've done that while we're getting wages growing again.
Well, we'll see soon enough. Sam Ray, Aaron Violi, great to see you both. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Kieran.